This is my new painting called Capitalism for hopefully obvious reasons. And I'm going to share with you the meaning behind every piece of this painting. And it's replacing the photograph that used to hang there, which was called Man Alone in the Ring. Now, if you are interested, at the end of this video, I will also share the story behind the Man Alone in the Ring photograph that I used to have hanging right there, because that one will always be super meaningful to me. But after I share the story and the details and all of the symbolism in this new painting, Capitalism, I'd like to hear from you whether you think that I should keep this hanging up in the background or maybe it's just a little bit too distracting. So right off the bat, we've got the two main characters. We've got Scrooge McDuck and we've got the Monopoly Man. Let's start off with the Monopoly Man. As you know, if you've ever played Monopoly, Monopoly is a game about mostly capitalism, but it also has some other elements in it that I think are really important to learn because they give you lessons on the way that the world really works. So first of all, the game is all about buying up as many cash flowing assets as possible. You're buying up real estate, but it's not just real estate. It's real estate that has businesses built on it. You're trying to put houses on it. You're trying to put hotels on it. You are trying to bring in cash flow from your assets. This is an extremely important aspect of investing, and playing the game of Monopoly over and over again as a kid will kind of instill those behaviors and those practices into you when you go on later in life in order to invest correctly. Another thing the game of Monopoly teaches you about capitalism and investing and success is to use leverage appropriately. Now, if you mortgage all your properties and get too much into debt, you're going to go bankrupt. But if you do it appropriately, it can help you win the game. Now, there are plenty of other lessons, but the third lesson from the game of Monopoly that I absolutely love is the fact that the bank can never go broke. I mean, this is literally written into the rules of Monopoly, but it teaches you about the fake money system that we have today, that money is literally loaned and printed into existence. And so in the game, the amount of money, the money supply fluctuates largely from the money coming in and out of the bank. And in today's world, that's how it works as well. The money goes in and out of the banks and ultimately the Federal Reserve, and that increases and decreases the money supply. And finally, worth noting is that this game teaches you that you can't just rely on handouts. You can't rely on just going around the board, pass and go, collecting your $200, hitting community chest and chance in order to get enough money to win the game. If you want to get rich, according to the rules of Monopoly, you have to buy assets. Okay, so the next character in this painting is Scrooge McDuck. Now, many of you probably grew up watching DuckTales, the cartoon, but if you didn't, these three kid ducks have an uncle. They call him Uncle Scrooge, and he is a character based off of Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol. And the main character trait that he carries over from that is that he is a miser. In other words, he has a lot of money stored up and he does not like spending that money. So much so that he has an entire tower that is literally just full of gold coins, and it's a cartoon, and so he swims in the gold coins, and that's how rich he is. But he hates spending money and he never wants to spend money on anything, even though he's incredibly rich. Now, the reason why I really like talking about misers like Scrooge McDuck or Ebenezer Scrooge is because I think that most people have a misconception about the role the miser plays in an economy. Assuming you aren't the Federal Reserve or a crook or the government, the only way for you to get your hands on money is to give somebody else something that they want badly enough. They are voluntarily willing to give up some of their money in order to get that. Every time you buy a burger, it's because you want the burger more than that money. Every time you pay your rent, it's because you want to have that place to live more than you want that money. It's not that those things are inherently more valuable than the money. It's just that that month's rent is more valuable to you than that amount of money. But you probably don't pay rent at two different places because the rent itself, the apartment itself, is not more valuable than those dollars. It's just the fact that you need a place to live just for that month is more valuable than those dollars. Another way to put it is if you are to find a sale on milk at the store, you might buy a couple of gallons, but you're not going to buy out the entire store of all of their milk. It's not that the milk was inherently more valuable than the money you gave up. It's that those 5 jugs of milk that you bought were more valuable than the $20 you gave up. But past that, you value the money more. The reason why I'm harping on this is because anytime there is a free exchange, voluntary exchange, when two parties say, yes, we want to give up something in order to get something else in return, both people profit, even if one thing being exchanged is money. Now, the thing about money is that it serves as a medium of exchange and a store of value. In other words, I'm going to give up something of real value, of real world world use of wealth, some good or some service, some food, some product, my labor, my time, and in exchange for that, I'm going to get money. Money in and of itself is inherently useless. You don't use money for anything. You store the value of your labor and your time in that money, and someday in the future, you go to exchange that money for real wealth. And we know that money doesn't have inherent value because if they just print up a bunch of money and you cause hyperinflation, the value of the money ceases to be there. Similarly, if we were to see an asteroid land on Earth and it was full of gold and every single person on Earth got hundreds or thousands of ounces of gold equally, then gold would probably pretty soon become worth a lot less. You would have hyperinflation in gold. So it's not the money that has the value, it is the fact that it is used as a store of value. And that is why people accept it as payment. So when you have somebody who is a miser, what they have done when they have a lot of money and they don't spend it is they've spent their entire life giving products, giving service, giving value, giving labor, giving time to people in the economy. In exchange, they've gotten an IOU. They've gotten a receipt. They have gotten a claim on real wealth, something that they could in the future go use to get real wealth. They could take some of that money and go buy food, go buy houses, go buy planes, go buy travel, go buy luxuries. They could exchange that for real wealth, but the miser doesn't. And so the miser has spent his entire life creating value for society and never redeeming his claims on value in return. He has spent his entire life making other people's lives better and never cashing in on his rewards. Meanwhile, he's made out to look like the villain when he's been performing a public service the entire time. So I really appreciate Scrooge McDuck because he gives us some insights into how money and value work and the importance of people who save in society, ultimately producing a lot more than they consume. But if you notice, Scrooge McDuck and the Monopoly Man are playing poker, and this was an intentional choice because poker is a game of risk, where you have to be willing to sacrifice something. You have to take the chance that you might lose if you want the opportunity to win big. And this is something that is absolutely true in both investing and in entrepreneurship. But even more than that, just in life in general. The more you are willing to give up and sacrifice, usually the more you have the chance to gain. Now, the sacrifice has to be done in the right way. You can't just say that sacrifice inherently will always equal more gain, because if you give up the wrong things at the wrong time for the wrong reasons, then you could absolutely end up worse off. So that's why it's risk. You have to learn how to appropriately take risk, what to appropriately sacrifice over the long term so that you can have the maximum gain. And the game of poker represents a lot of those lessons wrapped up in it. You can't just always go all in and risk losing everything and have a guaranteed outcome of winning the pot every time, because somebody could call your bluff and you might not have the best hand. But you can't always play it safe and never risk anything. Otherwise, you just slowly bleed out and eventually lose the game from slowly losing, one or two chips, whatever the minimum bid is each time. Because in life, that's how it works. There's a minimum bid. You have to spend money in order to survive. So there is wisdom in learning how to take risks appropriately over time in order to maximize long-term wealth. Now, the other thing that you might notice is the forms of money that are being used in this game. We have dollar bills, we have cash, but we also have gold bars. And if you notice on Scrooge's jacket, he has a little Bitcoin pin. And I like incorporating multiple types of money because yes, these are all different forms of money. Some are better than others, and some we are yet to see how they will turn out over time. But the key is that in life, we don't actually have to choose all in on one form of money or one form of investment. We don't have to choose one asset class. We can diversify. It's important to have some of your savings in sound money, in something that for thousands of years has never changed in its purchasing power, something that its purchasing power has been preserved for literally thousands of years. There's wisdom in that. There is safety in that. But it's also important that we know how to use the fiat system that we live in. You can't just use gold today. You have to use dollars. And it's also true that that system might fail and it might be replaced by something digital like Bitcoin. And if you are not prepared for that or not willing to accept that that might be the case in the future and have even a tiny little allocation to it for the off chance that that becomes true, then you will be left behind. And finally, in this painting, they are playing poker together, which is a game which represents competition. And in business and in life, in entrepreneurship and investing, there's always competition. If you are starting a business, that's something you want to look for, because competition means there is demand for your product. You don't need to do a survey. You don't need to go ask people if they would buy your stuff. All you need to do is look for competition. Do it better, do it cheaper, higher quality, do it your own way, but do something that there already exists competition on. That way you know there's demand. There's no such thing as a saturated market. The fact that McDonald's exists doesn't stop new burger companies from starting up and taking some of the market share. Five Guys did it, and they did it their own way. McDonald's existence didn't mean there wasn't room for Five Guys. There's a near infinite demand for burgers, as measured by the fact that there are already so many successful McDonald's. That's a sign to get into a business, not to be afraid of it. And if you're looking at an area and you think, oh good, I'm the only one doing this, there's nobody else doing it, that's actually a red flag. There's probably a reason why people who are more experienced than you in business are not doing the thing you're thinking of doing. And it's probably because it won't work. So when you're starting out, looking for your niche, looking to start a side hustle or a business for yourself, look for competition first. The other thing that competition represents, specifically regarding investing, is that there's always something out there that you can invest in. The trick is to find the best possible investments and not get distracted by the things that might look flashy, but maybe you just don't understand as much. You want to play the game that you are good at. This is why Warren Buffett says never invest in anything that you don't understand. The competition is too fierce, you will get eaten alive, and you will probably lose money because you got into something that you just didn't know. When you play to your strengths and you are able to focus on just the things that you are good at, you will win. Now, this painting was painted by Daria Kolosova, wonderful artist. I will have her Instagram linked below. And if you couldn't tell from the close-ups, it is painted on copper. It is just stunning in person. I'm really excited about it. But I am aware that it might be a little bit too flashy, a little bit too distracting, maybe even a little bit too goofy for the background of my videos. And it might be something that will serve to distract rather than assist with these videos. So let me know in the comments whether you think I should keep this up, get something else, or go back to what I had before. And if you're curious about the picture that I had hanging up there before, the name of it was Man Alone in the Ring. And if you couldn't tell from the background of my videos, you can see here that this was a picture of a man in a boxing ring inside of a boxing gym. Basically looks like it's nighttime, nobody's there, the janitor's gone, the lights are off, he's leaning against the ropes and he is just exhausted. Now, the first time I saw this photograph, I was out on a date with my wife. We were waiting for our reservation to start. So we were at a secondhand furniture store just looking around. I saw this photograph hanging up on the wall and something just hit me. I was looking at this photograph of this boxer just looking almost defeated, exhausted, by himself. And I didn't know why at the time, but it just kind of hit me hard and kind of spoke to me. And I looked at the price, it was a couple $100s, and I was like, that's ridiculous. And so I left, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. For the next couple of nights and couple of weeks, I kept on thinking about it in my head, just the photograph, the feeling that that guy leaning against the ropes gave me, and I was able to figure out why it spoke to me so much. You see, when I quit my job as a stockbroker, I didn't have any plan for how I was going to make money. All I knew was that I wanted to teach people how money really works so that they could invest for themselves, would not have to pay exorbitant fees to have some money manager just put them in index funds that they could do for themselves. And by the way, those index funds just by themselves are not the greatest investment anyway. So my only goal was to teach people how money works so you can invest for yourself, make more money, and not have to pay those stupid fees. And I had no idea how I was gonna make money doing this. I wrote children's books and I tried to self-publish them. I wrote another regular book and I tried to self-publish it. I started a blog, I started a podcast, I started a YouTube channel. I did one-on-one consulting with people, setting up financial plans for them. I tried literally everything I could think of just to make money trying to help people out with their finances. And it took me 6 months before I ever made my first dollar for myself. Now, I remember when that first sale came through, I was refreshing my email, I was getting gas, it was dark outside, I refreshed my email, looked down, saw the thing pop up and said, hey, you just got a sale. And man, I could have cried. It was one of the most motivating and freeing things that I had ever felt before. And I was just flooded with emotion. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I finally made some money. Now, from that point, it was still a whole nother year before I made enough money just to pay the bills. So in total, from the day I quit my job, it was a year and a half before I made enough money to pay the bills. And so it was during that time when my wife and I were on this date and I saw this picture hanging on the wall and I realized I felt like that guy in the boxing ring by himself training. I had walked away from a $250,000 per year salary, walked away from great benefits. I had a family at home, and I was in the trenches. I was in the boxing ring by myself. No trainer was there. No janitor was there. The lights were off. There was no glory. There was nobody cheering me on. There was nobody praising me. There were no fans in the stands looking down. There was nothing. No glamour. It was just me trying to get good enough so I could eventually win. So I couldn't stop thinking about this photograph. I called up the secondhand furniture store and I said, hey, here's a picture I saw on your wall. Is there any way that you still have it? And unfortunately, they did not have it. So I spent the next weeks, probably months, trying to track down this photograph. And you can imagine, if you just go on Google and you type in man alone in a boxing ring, there are going to be millions of stock photographs of guys in boxing rings. And I searched through photograph after photograph after photograph, every variation I could possibly think of to try and search for this. And I found it. I couldn't believe it, but I actually found it. I was able to track down. It was being used as a cover art for a song on SoundCloud, and I was able to click on some links, and I tracked back to the photographer's website, which wasn't a very well-designed or SEO optimized website, but I was able to find it, and I found an email address, and I emailed him. I said, hey, how much for this? And he said $500 or $600, which was more than it was at the furniture store. And I was like, dang it. And at the time, remember, I wasn't making any money. So I told him, I was like, all right, I don't have the money yet. I will email you again in 1 year. And a little bit before 1 year later after that, my wife actually went through the exact same process. And for my birthday, she surprised me with it. And that's the photograph that's been hanging on my wall ever since. And as a note of encouragement to anybody that is currently that guy in the boxing ring by yourself, or you're considering getting into that boxing ring by yourself and going through the training, trust me, it's worth it. You may have to burn some bridges. You may have to burn some boats. You may have to sacrifice a lot of things that you didn't know you were going to have to sacrifice before. But you will become the person necessary to get where you need to go if you leave yourself no other choice. I left behind a great salary and great benefits, and it took me a long time to figure out how to make money online. And now that I have a personal income of 7 figures a year, I have people telling me, oh, it must be nice. This just worked out for you. It landed in your lap. You timed this thing perfectly. And it's like, sure. Of course, there's always going to be luck involved. But when I was in the gym every night, training with nobody there, by myself, nobody there to cheer me on, nobody there to laugh at me either, I didn't see you there. And so if you want the results that somebody else has gotten, most of the time, you're gonna have to do the same things they did to get there. And at least for me, it was worth it. And I think for you, it'd probably be worth it as well. That's all. Thanks for watching. And remember to drop a comment. Let me know if you think I should keep this one up or put something else up instead. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day.